you made it just in time, because today I'm going to be demonstrating how to make a paper mache mask using clay.
What?
If you're new here or you've just never seen me before in your life, that's understandable. My name is Renee and I'm fairly new to this. Welcome to my channel, Created by Renee. I am so excited you're here because today I'm going to be demonstrating how to make a paper mache mask using non-hardening clay. Let's get started. Historically, in many countries around the world, masks have been made from many different materials. We can look to different cultures for inspiration to create our own mask. Because Africa is such a huge continent with so many different nations and cultures, it's a great place to get started. A little investigation will uncover that in many cultures, masks have symbolic meanings and representations. Some of my other favorite cultures to look to for mask inspiration are the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific Islands. The list goes on because you can find masks in practically every culture in the world. These are books from my own personal library, and since I'm getting a little distracted, we're going to wrap up this quick history lesson and get started. The creative prompt I'll be using for this project is your spirit animal. If you don't know what a spirit animal is, or you don't have a specific animal that you identify with, you can use the links in the description below to take a quick quiz and find your spirit animal. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, spirit animals are simply animals that you identify with or connect with spiritually because of what they do and what they are. These quizzes and the concept of spirit animals are for fun and entertainment only. I took the quiz on both websites and my first result was butterfly, my second dragonfly. I love both, but for this project I'm going to go with the butterfly theme. So I have my design, but how is this going to translate into a mask, you might be wondering. Sit tight while we grab some supplies and talk. To make a mask in this technique, you'll need to start with some non-hardening clay. These colors don't really matter. They typically come in these different craft colors unless you get the artist non-hardened clay like this one. There's not really a difference, I'm going to tell you. Just go to your local big box store or follow the links that I'm going to post in the description. And just be sure the package says reusable or non-hardening clay. Alternatively, you could use an oven-baked clay like Sculpey or Fimo to create hard, reusable molds like these. That would mean an extra step though, because you do need to bake these in the oven. You'll need water, preferably in a spray bottle, talcum powder, assorted used papers that can easily be ripped into strips, some white glue, and tools to help you sculpt. These can be things from your kitchen like skewers, popsicle sticks, toothpicks, you get the idea. Let's look at some examples. These are clay molds that I made to create mini masks. The technique I'll be showing you in this video involves layering paper strips onto clay forms to create masks like these. And here's an example of a full-size mask. This mask actually has a history. It was actually created for a tutorial for the show Craft Lab on the DIY Network years ago. It is a classic example of a mask with a hollow back that can either be worn or hung on a wall for display. So I'm knocking on it to make a case for what I'm about to tell you. While it's not mandatory by any means, the standard number of layers recommended for paper mache to make a hard surface is 7. You can obviously apply fewer layers, but you may not have as sturdy a piece. For starters, let's shape the clay. I'm working on a flexible, clear cutting mat so that I can look at my drawing while I'm shaping the clay. I chose an inexpensive store-bought wood tool for this, but as I mentioned earlier, you can use skewers, you can use toothpicks, you can use kitchen utensils, whatever works for you to create the shapes you want. Keep in mind that this is a relief style form, meaning that it's going to be flat on the back and you're only going to be paper macheing on the front side of it. So you don't have to worry about sculpting the back. Here's a funny trick I picked up in my life sculpture class in art school. We would use the artist version of the non-drying clay to sculpt the models. And to finish them off and to make sure that you could see the musculature very well so we could get the best grade, we would use water to smooth and sort of harden and solidify this clay. Nope, it does not water the clay down. In non-drying clay, it actually smooths the clay and makes it harder, sort of like if you were to put it in the refrigerator, so it holds its shape when you start adding paper. Now let's talk release agents. For this project, we're using talc powder, not petroleum jelly like we would with other paper mache projects. The reason is that petroleum jelly actually would over time cause this type of clay to degrade. Be sure to apply plenty of talc and you'll see why later. Now we're going to apply paper. You can use a number of different types of paper. The only type of paper that I can think of that I probably wouldn't recommend is like copy paper, because it's harder to rip and not as flexible as, say, packing paper or newspaper. I'm starting out by creating my glue and water mixture. If you haven't seen the video on creating this mixture and doing this method of paper mache, I will link it right here and below in the description. But all it involves is mixing glue and water to a slightly thinner consistency than normal glue so that you can run paper through it easily. Because I'm making a mini mask for this tutorial, I am using skinny strips of paper so that I don't lose the details in my mask. If you've never worked with this method of paper mache in the past, I recommend you start with a full-size mask and fewer, simpler details so it's easier for you to finish your mask without frustration. The more details that are in your clay shape that you need to keep track of, the trickier it will get as you do several layers of paper mache. Remember, you're doing layers of the paper, so you'll have to go back in and make sure that your details are not totally lost in all those layers. I ultimately only did 4 to 5 layers on this mask because it's a small one, but here's a tip. If you're only doing a few layers or you're doing less than 7 layers on a piece, try to use plenty of the glue mixture because that will help the paper to harden. You don't want to go crazy with it, but you need to use enough so that the paper is saturated and sticks together and hardens really well. Now I'm using a small knitting needle to help me find those details again that were sort of lost in translation. So here the mask has dried a little and I'm continuing to work in the details, and I'm going to go ahead and add some more of the glue mixture to help me do that. And I'm just using the knitting needle to help me find those original lines and make sure that they're still showing up through the paper. Here's another tip. Take a picture of your clay mask sculpture before you start layering the paper on so you can refer back to it and remember where your details were. You can also use your original sketch. Now, obviously, through several layers of paper, you're not exactly going to be able to maintain the same level of detail that you had on your clay sculpture, but the beauty is that later on, when you paint, you can use contouring to help the shapes come back out. My next tip would be don't neglect your sides. You can actually apply more layers of paper onto the sides of your mask than you did onto the front of the mask because you want nice, strong sides. Remember, you may be putting holes into the sides of the mask to either display it or wear it, so you want nice, strong sides. I've tried to remember all my best tips to help you make this project a success, but if I think of any later, I will definitely add them to the description box. Once you've allowed your paper to dry and harden, it's time to remove the clay mold. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button for notifications so you'll know when the next creative video comes out. So here's where it got a little tricky. I didn't use quite enough talcum powder before I started layering paper onto the clay shape. So it's not pulling free from the paper form as easily as it normally would. It's not the end of the world and the project isn't ruined. Thankfully, though it's dry, the paper is still pretty flexible, so I can bend and stretch it until I can get this clay all the way out. If the paper form were to rip in the process, it would be easy to fix by adding more layers of paper strips to the ripped area. Also, if this were a full-size mask, once I scrape the remainder of the clay out of the back, I would be adding more layers of paper to make it harder and sturdier. Now let's trim the edges. There's bound to be some overlap when you're layering paper and you just need to clean it up with a pair of scissors. So before painting and embellishing, we'll need to trim these edges and make them neater. If this were a full-size mask that was going to remain hollow in the back, then I would go around the edges with another layer of strips. But since it's not, let's move forward. To complete the design of this particular mask, I'm going to actually close up the back with heavy card. This is the type of card stock that is in your pantry. It makes up cereal boxes and other dry food boxes. Because my mask is designed around the butterfly theme, I decided I wanted a flower background so it can look like the butterflies landed on a flower, but still accommodates a face in the design. You can absolutely leave your mask open and hollow in the back. I'm just closing mine up because it goes with my design idea. I'm closing my mask off and putting the cardstock on the back, but I'm just going to go ahead and stuff it with paper first. If you're keeping your mask hollow to wear or display, this is the point where you would add holes to the sides for string or rope or whatever you want to use. Now I'm going to use my hot glue gun to glue this to the flower that I cut out of cardstock. So I'll be honest, in my lifetime of being an artist, my work has almost always gone through a crappy phase. This project was no exception. It's basically the phase where I'm not sure the project is going in the direction I want it to. It doesn't seem to be matching up with my vision, but thankfully it usually works out after all. How to finish your mask. Obviously you can use paint, but there are numerous other options for what you can use to embellish your mask. The only real limit is your imagination, but just for argument's sake, I'll share a few here and in the description box below. Just to name a few, you can use fabric, scrapbook paper, dimensional paint, glitter, buttons, yarn, gummy bears. Okay, not gummy bears. For my mask, I stuck with acrylic paint, dimensional paint, and gold marker. What do you think? Since I'm trying to keep this video from going ridiculously long, please watch out for future tutorials for some of my painting techniques. If you like this tutorial, I would love a like and a subscribe from you, and I will see you in the next one.
By creating an imaginary picture. Usually it's something that moves.